Right. So here we are, sports fans. This is the final seminar of the business module. I would very, very much like to hope that you've learned a hell of a lot around your own personal management, client management, checking in, training, programming, data collection, onboarding process, pretty much every avenue that you need to manage yourself, manage clients, take on clients, and also really push towards getting some really good results as well. So when it comes to this seminar now, case studies, what I don't like to do is to have specific case studies around individuals. I look at target groups and populations and discussions around that. But what you've got to understand is when you're working with a client, every single one of them is different, even if they are in a same categorization of some form of kind. So basically, if you've got a female client who weighs X amount and does X amount, that still does not mean that she's going to have the exact same nutrition strategy and training strategy and overall approach as someone else. So when it comes to case studies, I'm going to talk about specific stuff with working with target groups and population groups in general. But we're not really going to dive into, right, Sally, who weighs X amount, needs to eat this much protein and do this much exercise, because as you will find out, it doesn't matter how much education you've got, experience, how much your target audience is, the target client is. Every single person that you come into contact with from a coaching perspective will need a different approach, or one way or another. So when we dive into this, just understand we're going to go into a bit of the science side of it. We're going to a bit of the psychology side of it, and we're going to overall look at discussion points based on different approaches and stuff like that, really. So let's kick things off. So first up, seminar objectives. So we have got a brief explanation of the trans-theoretical model of behavior change, the importance of client priming phase, why you should avoid bulking, considerations for aggressive fat loss, considerations when building lean muscle, why you should understand adaptive thermogenesis, the parasympathetic nervous system, general population clients, weekend warriors, the morbidly obese, under eating, female suboptimal body fat, male suboptimal body fat, and you're only as good as your worst client to finish, which again, this is a really, really good point to kind of wrap up this whole seminar. So starting things off, what is the trans-theoretical model of behavior change? So the trans-theoretical model of behavior change is a psychological model which will basically process map someone from pre-contemplation to action. So basically, pre-contemplation would be where a client is not even genuinely thought about actually coaching yet. They're aware that they need to make lifestyle changes. They're aware that they need to make changes, but they've not really got to that point yet. Contemplation would be where they are potentially like looking into it. They're researching you as a coach to kind of at that point where they go, right, I'm looking to commit at this point. Preparation is where they will invest into someone to help them, or they will do it themselves. Action is where they will take all the advice from preparation into action. And then this is where at this point they will start to get results. You've got maintenance and then relapse, which often will lead back to pre-contemplation. So what am I getting at with this? Even if when someone comes to you at preparation, they are still more than likely going to be in the pre-contemplation and contemplation phase. So I will work with a lot of clients and a lot of coaches, and they'll be like, wow, why are they not getting results straight away? Why are they not motivated straight away? Why are they not disciplined straight away? Obviously, we know to avoid the term motivation, but it's a case of, right, why are these guys kind of not disciplined, or why is things not clicking with them yet? And it's because of this trans-theoretical model of behavior change. It all comes down to this. Once someone gets to that point of preparation, action, and maintenance, it's maintenance for a reason, because they've worked through this whole behavioral change model. So the first thing that I can say to you guys who are going to be going into the industry and working with general population clients is you've got to understand this model. You've got to understand that it will take time. You have to create a strategy based on this model. So if you have someone who is at pre-contemplation and contemplation phase, and you throw them straight into like a maintenance type approach to nutrition and training or an action approach, then they're going to jump probably straight into this relapse because they've not gone through this process. So when it comes to nutrition, it's about creating really small micro changes, which will then let them step up at their own pace. If you go in too intense from a training or nutrition perspective, you will create relapse in these people. So I'm talking about exercise progression. I'm talking about nutrition progression from a food diary to a actual sticking to a meal plan, or going from if it fits your macros to then a food diary to then going into that type of stuff. You've got to build into this. Or for example, someone may not be ready for a form of aggressive fat loss approach because they're still in this pre-contemplation contemplation phase where they need to see and feel motivated by kind of what they are doing first. Because if you throw someone at the deep end, you'll create relapse, you're not going to get result, and this is how you create a vicious cycle. You've got to take this into consideration and have empathy for clients. You can't just basically take them on and within a few weeks kind of be giving them shit, going, look, why kind of not where I want to be, or why are you not doing this? What you've got to do is often if you've got a client who's kind of stuck, show them this model. Say, look, you've got to kind of picture yourself on this model right now. And then explain every single key process. Go, right, where do you think you are? So you're at preparation, right? How do we get to action? Show them this, because then they don't feel bad. You don't get to this. I've used this technique, and I'm talking hundreds of times in the last 8 years, hundreds of times. And I've said, right, put yourself on this model. Where do you think that you are right now? Are you at the contemplation phase or the preparation phase, right? If you're here, right, what do you think we need to do to get to preparation? And they'll tell you. And when you give them this little bit of a key, they'll step up and they'll step up. And then when it gets to maintenance, you're pretty much taking over the show. But this will only come from you having empathy for this type of client and also educating them on this process from a psychological perspective, as well as an education and training and nutrition and everything else as well. So that's my starting point for case studies. This is not a case of jumping and going, right, you have to do this with clients. I'm turning around to you and saying, look, some clients will not be ready to change straight away. It is your job to educate and empower and then support them until they can carry themselves. And just really be mindful of the type of approach that you put in straight away. Right. Then, so if you, for example, you have got a client, like we've just said, in preparation phase, the easiest way I can probably describe this is someone who is in pre-contemplation and contemplation phase, where imagine this is the TRANSTHEORETICAL model of behavior change. So this is obviously from a physiological and nutrition standpoint, but I'm going to jump psychology into this. This is pre-contemplation, contemplation, preparation, action, maintenance. So can you see what I'm trying to say now from that previous model? If you throw someone straight into this type of approach, you've got a relapse effect in the middle here. So in this phase now, right, what you need to be looking at is creating a priming phase. So a priming phase is pretty much where you will look at getting someone to a point of optimal body composition. When someone is at a point of optimal body composition, they will have an improved heart rate. They'll have improved heart rate variability. They'll have an improved routine. They'll have improved discipline and motivation. They'll have improved metabolic upregulation. They'll have performance markers in place. They'll have education in place, and they'll have client standards in place. Because it's not just about getting someone from A to B and losing body fat, because as I will teach you on this, losing body fat with a client is very, very, very easy. Keeping a client locked in over a sustained period of time, making them perform better in both the training, gym, relationship within themselves. Now, that's the real key to coaching. And that's how I like to tell people how to coach. Don't just become a to B transformation coach. You want to create someone who they never thought was possible. So the perfect place is having a priming phase, because what happens when you get to a priming phase, you can do whatever you want with them. They have got increased nutrient partitioning. So that basically means that they will split cells much more efficiently at a faster rate. So energy, protein, fats, they'll utilize energy better. They have got more room to put on excess body fat to then enable them to perform better by having a higher training stimulus. At this point, they will have less cardio to do, which will improve their heart rate variability, their resting heart rate. And at that point, you create a client who will pay you for a very long period of time. Guess why? Because they feel fucking amazing. This is a real point I'm trying to get across on this one. You're creating a priming phase to show someone, right, and you've got to educate them and say, look, when you get to this point, you'll be at this peak point, optimal body composition. You will have all this in place. So I know, so you've got to explain to them, look, I know right now that you might feel a bit fatigued because you're doing more cardio, you eat a little bit less food, but educate them on how they will respond afterwards. Because what you'll often find is if you're just constantly focusing on a transformation with a client saying, look, we've got to get you shredded, that's so unresourceful. I'll never turn around to a client and go, right, we're going to get you shredded. I'm going to turn around and go, look, I'm getting you to this point so I can do this with cardio, food, performance, and how you feel. So they're not looking at that end result anymore. They're looking past that going, look, I'm getting leaner, I'm feeling good. God, and I can actually perform and stay like this. Yes, because you're at that point of optimal body composition. So I would say the majority of clients that you take on, unless they are under eating, will need at least a 3 to 4 week priming phase on all these markers in reducing fat loss, improving heart rate variability, getting the routine in place. Because once you've got this, you've got a regimented client and you've got a loyal client and you've got someone who can take them to a very good place. Right, why should avoid bulking? It's right. So this guy on the left, that is unless you are a strong man or a powerlifter or something like that, that is absolutely unnecessary. For example, this, in my opinion, look at your general population, that would be someone who's in very, very good shape. Somewhere sitting around the middle between this may be the kind of where the point where you'll take someone on maybe a gaining phase. But again, the leaner and better in shape that you keep someone at all times, the more responsive they are going to be. And also what you will find is if someone has the term bulking locked into their head, the moment that they start putting on excessive body fat, they will have a decreased and basically readiness and HRV, which means they won't recover as well if they get that fat. They will also have a higher resting heart rate, which again is no good for cardiovascular health and recovery anyway. They'll have reduced nutrient partitioning if they do get to a point of obesity, or like I said, this guy, even though he's holding a lot of muscle, will be classed as someone who is overweight. They'll have poor quality sleep. They'll have reduced discipline. They'll have an off-type attitude. They'll have to extend the fat loss phase when you do actually get them to the point of building enough muscle. They'll have higher overall stress, and the client will feel uncomfort. So I don't know, again, sometimes this is commonly known, but the amount of times that I see bulking thrown around with mentors or kind of clients and stuff like that, take that word out of it. Look, you want to be looking at like an improvement phase or an off season. You could potentially, because you're seasoned condition and off, but never use the term bulking, because the moment you start throwing that word around, you start throwing off an off attitude. And I'm getting this right. Everything I'm saying to you here right now is about you retaining clients and then keeping them. If you let a client slip to the point where they have got poor sleep, reduced discipline, off-type attitude, they have to extend then they've got too fat to the point where they feel like they can't come back. They've got really, really high stress. If you allow them to get to that point, they are not going to pay you anymore. That's why you need to look at this. Like, yes, people might say, yeah, but you got to put loads of energy into it to get to this certain point. But the thing is, your job is to make a client feel good. When it comes to a bit more of extremes, even from a bodybuilding perspective, I would never, ever let someone get to that point of carrying that much excess body fat based on a performance, condition, everything point of view. So just take that into consideration and really think about, right, you don't use the word bulking anymore. So before a priming phase, and that's your reason why, this is why we avoid bulking. Yes, you can get out of condition. That's where you build the most muscle, because you've got better recovery, where you are not under stress from being as lean. You've got that extra energy pushing in, but there is a certain point where it's not beneficial for their progress, for their performance, or your client retention. I know so many clients with coaches who have just dropped off. We've dropped off simply just because they just don't feel good anymore. So just take that into consideration and never ever let your clients use the word term bulking, and you should never be using it with them either. So considerations for aggressive fat loss. This is where it gets fun. So people frown upon aggressive fat loss. This is all the different things you need to take into consideration if you're going to drop someone into an aggressive fat loss approach. Right, so for starters, have they got enough weight which can warrant an aggressive fat loss approach? Or is it a simple case of just taking a little bit slower? Right, are they male or female? Males can deal with aggressive fat loss a lot better than females. If you push a female to suboptimal body composition, which is another slide now, which I'm not going to go into, you can create cessation of the menstrual cycle. That is going to not go in line with anything that you want from a client enjoyment or a results perspective in general. Right, so what is their current need or eat? For example, if someone has no available time to put into expenditure, you can have to drop the food down quite low, and that's not going to be a fun process for them. So you're probably best off going for a bit of a slower approach. If someone is putting a hell of a lot of movement in with non-exercise activity thermogenesis and exercise activity thermogenesis, then, and they're not losing body fat, then you kind of know something's wrong from a eating behavior and binge behavior. Because if you stick that, if someone's coming in and they're reporting that they've got 150 to 160,000 steps a week, they're doing 4 lots of 30 minutes cardio, and you've got a diet which you know is in a deficit and they are still not losing weight, you know straight away that that client is not sticking to that diet. If you put them on a fat loss approach at that point, then again, it's just going to probably create more binge. Protein consumption. So if you want to be losing body fat, you want to be looking at a high protein consumption. So up to a certain point, I have seen people going 3 grams per kilo body weight of protein. That will actually do a crossover effect here of looking at forms of GI distress, which is the last thing that you want to be creating with anyone who is trying to lose body fat from an inflammatory response perspective. You've got to look at their actual goal. When is their goal and what is the type of goal? Does it warrant that type of approach? You've got to remember, with aggressive fat loss, you've got a high drop-off effect. It is going to require a certain type of client. If someone is going through a really high volume training, you don't want to be dropping them into aggressive fat loss because they are not going to be able to deal with it. And also training style. You've got to ensure that your client has a level of compliance first. I know if you drop someone straight into aggressive fat loss and you've only just started working with them, it's a bad idea because you literally do not know anything about them in any way, shape or form. Again, you don't know what their discipline is. You don't know what their food volume has previously been at. So for example, if someone has been running a really, really low calorie and macro diet with high expenditure and they come to you and they're overweight, they have been binging, they have not been having consistent and structured meals in place. So the moment that you put smaller, structured and consistent meals in place, then they are going to drop energy and downregulate the metabolic rate in a very, very fast way, and they are not going to be able to handle it. Again, as normal, have they got the available time to put into exercise? What is their current appetite regulation like? So if you have got someone who is reporting the fact that they feel quite hungry on their metrics, don't go for an aggressive fat loss approach. The time of the month, again, you want to kind of avoid any types of aggressive fat loss approaches with female physiology because they do need to consume a tiny little bit more energy to deal with the stress of that period. The phase of dieting, if someone has just come out of a comp prep and they, for example, have just ballooned up in weight and they go for an aggressive fat loss approach, that is not good at all. Again, this is why you want to control people out of different phases. Don't let them jump into them. So from a priming phase to a gaining phase, it's a slow. From a gaining phase to a fat loss phase, again, it's a slow approach. Yes, you can drop aggressive fat loss approaches in with high protein intake, high food volume, high expenditure, emphasis on sleep, Again, there's different forms of fat loss assistance out there. There's, like I said, I'm not bothered about talking about taboo topics, but I've got clients who use your himbine, you've got clenbuterol, you've got like fat burners and stuff like that, which again will either look at fat oxidation properties or the thermogenic side of it. And again, you've got to take that into consideration from a fat loss assistance perspective. You've got to look at the risk for reward. Again, if someone has to drop their food in too low compared to pushing their cardio up too high, is that going to create dietary and training induced stress based on their goal? Or will it actually be more beneficial for them to look at some form of fat loss assistance to reduce the point of that stress response? So again, there's a lot of stuff taken into consideration, and the most importantly out of this is your client relationship. If you've not got a good relationship with your client, do not put them into an aggressive fat loss approach, because again, aggressive fat loss could be anything: comp prep, photo shoot, someone who's just trying to drop body fat as much as possible or as fast as possible. You've got to take all these things into consideration. Right, consideration of building lean muscle. This is a bit of a funny slide, to be honest. I enjoyed doing this one. Right, so what is that? That is, and what is that? Fat loss and lean muscle mass gain. Right, so obviously you've heard the tortoise versus the hare. I found that photo and I actually found it very, very, very funny, to be honest. A lot more funny than I should have. But basically, this is a very, very similar comparison. So when it comes to fat loss, you can drop fat off clients aggressively. You can, if you've got a client, you can drop 2 to 3 to 4 kilos of body fat per week, depending on how much weight they have got. That is not bad for them in any way, shape, or form, because they are dropping body fat as long as they have got good health markers, they are feeling good, sleeping good, training good, still performing as a person in the relationship, stuff like that. Yeah, you can happily drop body fat off someone as rapidly as you want, because it is just scale weight. You've got to remember, when scale weight drops, it is everything under the sun. It is plasma, it is water, it is body fat, and sometimes even muscle. So obviously that is something you can do at a rapid rate. When it comes to building lean muscle mass, that is a slow ass process, I'm telling you now. So this is why my emphasis on the priming phase and avoiding bulking is so important, because people think that, for example, you get to a client into a priming phase, real lean. You put a bit of a high food intake into them, they have a few off-plan meals, they get into the gym, they go into the gym and they're like, wow, I feel massive, like I've built so much muscle in like 4 to 6 weeks. You've not, you've just got a hell of a lot of cellular swelling. You've got plasma wrapping around that muscle as much as possible. And you've just got a lot of inflammation, mate. And this is a tough cookie to crumble for people, because when they see visual change and they're like, wow, I've got really a lot of swelling in my body and I feel really pumped, they've not gained any muscle, they've just gained a lot of water. So this is why it's so important for you to understand, to teach your clients that, look, if we are going to go into a gaining phase, it is a very slow process and you have to tick a lot of boxes. So when someone gets to a gaining phase like this, this is where the priming phase really comes into play, because you need someone to have all the same attributes as someone in a priming phase: routine, nutrient portioning. They are training right. They are still getting their steps in. They are still getting themselves to bed early. They've still got a structured diet. They've still got high motivation, high compliance. It's exactly the same. There's no difference between a priming phase and a gaining phase. The only difference with a client gaining phase is they're slightly eating more and probably expending a little less energy. And it's your job to tell people that if somebody is jumping up at too much of a high scale weight rate, they are not building muscle. So if you've got a client, if you go, right, we're going to go into a gaining phase, and they slam on 2, 3, 4 kilos of muscle, or sorry, of scale weight in a month, you need to pull that shit back, because that client's just going to get fat. And this is really something more, it's a big confusion between, yes, you do have a rebound effect again, where yes, you'll build a slight amount of lean muscle mass in that period because you've got increased nutrient portioning, but it's only to a certain point. It's definitely not 2, 3, 4, 5 kilos, because what you'll find is the more seasoned someone is as an athlete or as a trainer, the harder it is. So these are the main things that if you want to get a client to building muscle and focus on building muscle, this is exactly the same as a priming phase, but simply with a tiny bit more energy. They've got to have training stimulus that will improve progressive overload. They've got to have training stimulus that will increase their training intensity. They've got to have training stimulus, remember, nutrition, which will improve their recovery metrics. They will have enough food, supplementation, sleep hygiene to get to bed early. Again, that's where all muscle is pretty much built. They'll have more than enough protein per kg. So if you're building lean muscle mass, you want to have at least 2 grams per kilo body weight. So, for example, a 100-kilo guy wants to be having at least a minimum of 200 grams of protein per day, every single day. They need to have a solidified routine, and they need to give it a hell of a lot of time. So that's how I also want to differentiate between the two: priming phase, aggressive fat loss, and building lean muscle mass, and how similar they all are, and kind of what you have to think about in those different respects. Right, let's get into the fun stuff. Right, so basically, I'm just going to get this open on one screen. So why is adaptive thermogenesis so important? This will dictate if somebody can lose body fat or gain muscle. So what I want you to imagine is that adaptive thermogenesis is metabolic upregulation. So that is where your metabolic rate is going a bit faster. It's working more efficiently. It's using more energy. It's been more proactive with fat loss and lean muscle mass gain. And then you've got metabolic downregulation, which is the obviously downregulation of these processes. So when it comes to, for example, you've got to break this down. So you've got energy intake, energy storage, and total energy expenditure, and the heat produced while at that work. Adaptive thermogenesis comes in at this point. It is part of this whole model. So basically, this is what the energy that you have to use. This is one what you actually put in. And then adaptive thermogenesis is what your body has to do to pretty much regulate itself. So what happens is if you push your client on too much of a hard deficit, so this is where, for example, when people are really, really lean and they basically go, right, they've had a refeed and they've basically put food in and they've lost scale weight and they're like, fucking hell, man, my metabolism's on fire, bro. I'm like, it's not. You've been in a harsh deficit and you've given your body what it wants to upregulate its metabolic rate. It's sped up processes. It's used all this energy, and that's why you've lost body fat. That's pretty much what the whole model behind a refeed. And it is exactly the same on the other hand. So from a fat loss perspective, if you drop someone's energy too low, and that will then reduce their output. That will reduce their productivity. That will increase stress. They will stop losing body fat because they have had a downregulated metabolic rate through adaptive thermogenesis. If you get to a point with a client and you're pushing food up for the sake of it, it will get to a point, and again, this is a little bit harder to get to, so you might have seen this thrown around when someone's really trying to put as much weight on as they can. Remember, you're not trying to put body fat on, but in terms of pushing yourself to a really, really big point from increasing lean muscle mass, the body weight will plateau. They'll get to this point where it's like, nope, not doing it anymore. Why? Because it wants to maintain this homeostatic regulation, which is the balance of these energy systems. Your body, however big you are at any given moment, does not want to lose weight. It does not want to gain weight. So you have to force adaptation with this. So, for example, you've got a client who wants to lose body weight. You've got to create enough of a deficit through dietary and training induced exercise or approach to warrant that loss. When it comes to adaptation to gaining lean muscle, you've got to do everything on the past slide with enough training stimulus to warrant enough recovery and training intensity to lift heavier weights to get the adaptation from that to recover, then go. So the only way that I can really explain this in the most easy possible way for you, if you push a client too far, they will stop doing what you want it to. Their body will stop doing what you want it to. So this is where you've got to take this into consideration. What is their energy like? What is their performance like? What is their mood like? What is their hydration? What is their HRV, their resting heart rate? What is their rate of fat loss at this point? How many weeks has it been since a deload? Take all this into consideration and really think, because what you've got to do is you've got to keep people away from that fight or flight response. which is based on what we'll talk about in the next slide, fight or flight response. But you keep people away from that point where the body's like, easiest way I can say it, no, fuck that. No, I've had enough. I'm not losing more body fat now. Right, you've pushed me too far. Oh, right, I'm not gaining more weight now. I'm not building muscle. You've kind of pushed it too far. That's where your body's like, I need to deload. I need to eat a little bit less food. You've pushed it a bit too far. So again, just take this to consideration when you are pushing someone to lose body fat or gain muscle mass. You've got to take this whole metabolic upregulation and downregulation and these points of fight or flight response, which I'll talk about in this next slide. Bit of heavy theory there, but that for me personally, that is it's a really important one. Right, so you've got the parasympathetic nervous system. So when the parasympathetic nervous system, so PSNS is activated, it slows our heart rate and breathing rates, lowers blood pressure and promotes digestion, our body into a state of relaxation. And this breeds recovery. The PS, I can never say that word, mate. PNS, I always say PNS because it's easier. It's sometimes known as rest and digest mode. So basically, this is client results. If, as we've spoke about, so I'll just get this up on here, it's easier to show you. Right, so as I've just spoke about, you've got this homeostasis, is a dynamic balance between autonomic branches. So basically, you've got your parasympathetic and you've got your sympathetic. Right, so this here is your basically any time that your body's like, shit, I need to do something. Right, this is any time that you are doing cardio. This is any time that you are training. This is any time that you are working. This is any time you're having a conversation. Any time that you are thinking in any way, shape, or form. Right, as you can see, they've even put a snake on this. You've got the other side, which is parasympathetic, which is rest and digest. So basically, this is the point where your body switches off. It relaxes, it gets out of this state of fight or flight response. So what I want you to understand is when you are really, really stressed, all right, so you're really, really stressed at work, how productive are you at work when you are really, really stressed? You're not in any way, shape or form because you are irate, you're irritated, you're reactive, you're kind of all over the place. That is exactly what happens to your body on a cellular level when you spend too much time in a sympathetic nervous state. If you do not get yourself into a state of PNS with good quality sleep, with time away from training, where you take a step back and relax, you are in overdrive mode all the time, and that is not going to benefit anyone. Imagine you're at work and you are working 7 hours. So let's just say you're working 7 12-hour shifts in a row. How productive are you going to be at your job and as a person by the end of it? So imagine that you put a client through a stupidly high cardio amount, stupidly high training, alongside they've got work pressures, life pressures, stress all round. Are they going to move in line with gains in lean muscle mass or fat loss or actually feeling good? No, not in any way, shape or form. So my point behind this is you're only as good as what you can recover from training, work, home, day-to-day stress, expenditure. And the biggest thing is just to give your clients time off. So quick fire, what I will do is I will monitor what someone's subjective feedback is like based on how they feedback with stress. I can see what they're like with the HRV and the resting heart rate, and I can see what they're like from a performance standpoint because I'm seeing them on video and everything else as well. So you paint a big picture of going right, and also you kind of track how many weeks someone is away from a deload, or kind of are they still looking at progressive overload, and just basically get as much feedback as possible, because you will be surprised the amount of times where you turn around to a client. I have done this so many times where I have had someone who's come off the back of some really, really aggressive fat loss approaches, or some strange strategies put in place. And I've turned around to that person and gone, right, I need you to have 2 or 3 days off. What? Anytime someone does a photo shoot or competition, or anything pushing to that point where the sympathetic nervous system has been really, really tested, take some time off, go and relax, chill. When they come back and they're like, wow, I'm actually lean and I feel 10 times better. This is what I mean. You've got to give people enough time to rest and digest and feel good. And in order to do that, that'll make them look good as well. So big point that I kind of want to get across in this final one as well is just making sure that, yes, you push your clients with this training, nutrition, cardio, bang, whatever approach, but you seriously need to understand why they need time off and why they need to relax as well. Right, so considerations for general population. So this is just discussion points now. This one's right. So if you have got a general population client, they are more than likely going to have to need to be taken through this TRANSTHEORETICAL model of behavior change, because these guys will be busy. They will not be invested. They potentially might even be doing it just for the sake of it. They're more than likely going to have the highest mobility issues, so you're going to have to look at getting them referrals and assessments. They're going to struggle with work-life balance. They're going to have a weekend mentality. They are going to have a lack of education. They potentially won't have much commitment, so they'll have a high drop-off effect. And they will also have low discipline and probably claim that they have low available time. Right, all of these people can be transitioned into client regimentation that achieves outstanding client results. So like this comes down to how you approach this. As I've previously said, right, if you throw someone into an aggressive, high intensity approach when they are not ready for it, you're not going to get a good response. So when it comes to general population clients, look at taking things steady. You want to basically over-educate at first, saying, look, I need you to tick these boxes so I can take you to this point where you'll look like this and you'll perform like that. So when it comes to general population clients, you've got to start low, start really, really steady. Just take your time. Look at food diaries, look at different options for food. If they are really busy professionals, then again, look at potential meal prep companies or sourcing stuff in supermarkets. But if you throw someone into, right, you go for an office job, you've got 6 meals a day, you've got 4 gym sessions at 8 to 10 rep ranges at 95% intensity on a Romanian deadlift and a squat, they're going to be like, what are you talking about? So this is okay, but what I often find is when PTs start working with general population clients, they're almost trying to impress them with fancy stuff. There's absolutely nothing basic about basics. If you want to get results with these people, you have to go in basic, you have to go in practical, and you have to transition them into regimentation. If you throw them into the hard stuff soon, it'll be a fight or flight response, more than likely, and they'll kind of just drop off and you've not got client retention. So it's when it comes to general population, it's about kind of education, definitely instilling a bit of authority with kind of what you are saying to them and how you approach your message, because they'll more than likely not really listen. So you've got to over explain the importance of it because they won't know. If you take someone who's really, really into the training and stuff like that, you're not going to need to explain that much because they kind of already know and they're already invested into it. So at first, this is a case of getting your client to a state of behavior change where they'll take action into maintenance. And again, you've got to address it in all these different ways. Right, considerations when coaching a weekend warrior, you will 100% have to take this on. Right, so first things first, you've got overall calorie consumption. You've got the diet compliances out the window. You've got training compliance out the window. You've got the sleep quality out the window. You've got toxicity, and you've got discipline and positive mental attitude out the window. They've got self-confidence out the window, and they've got the routine out the window. It's like, why is the teachers have to do this? Because if you're going to be stepping into this industry, you will be working with people who do have bad weekend routines. It is a case of, again, if you've got a general population client who is at the pre-contemplation or contemplation phase, they will 100% have some form of bad weekend behaviors. You are not going to be walking into a category of clients who are going to be staying sober at a weekend and not going to have the food at a weekend. So that's why I've put this in there, and basically just some really quick tips on kind of what you can do to try and limit damage as much as possible. You know, the first thing I'd be saying is if I was going to have a basically a point, I would basically try and eliminate them actually doing it. So for example, when it gets to like this point, if they've got a routine of going out at a weekend, don't be turning around and going, right, yeah, just go out at a weekend, but just drink this or do less cardio. I mean, do more cardio, eat less food. I would directly try and get them to avoid those situations, avoid those environments. So first things first, I'd be saying start down here and try and get them to make plans. I'd also get them to look at personal reflection on how the weekends actually make them feel and the reason why that they do it. And you've got to think, right, what do you value more? Do you value how you feel more on a Friday, or do you value more how you feel on a Monday morning? Again, it's all about psychology and instilling these behaviors, not because I've so many coaches go, I'll just tell them to eat less and move more. No, try and get them to stop. I'm not saying don't go out and enjoy social occasions, because I love social occasion. But at the same time, if you're doing it every single weekend, then there is some form of like negative routine with that, and it's going to really, really inhibit you getting those results. So I'd be looking at getting them to make plans. I'd look at them to have personal reflection on how it makes them feel. I'd look at motivational interviewing, and I'd be looking at that point, right, how can we look at damage limitation? So, for example, if overall calorie consumption is really high through beer and stuff like that, what type of drink choices can they make? Can they switch to spirits? If they have got really poor diet compliance, can they look at potentially actually buying prep meals in or making sure they're prepped at the weekend? If their training compliance goes to shit because they are feeling too rough for 2-3 days afterwards, right, can you get them to be forcing themselves to do steps and cardio and get them to prove that they are? This is all stuff I like to avoid if you do this stuff properly at the bottom. Again, toxicity. So can they be drinking water on the night before, during, to make sure the hydration levels are there? Can you actually get them to have hydration supplements if in place, if you do know that they have a planned social occasion and you don't want them to come into the next week feeling rubbish? So this is what you got to understand. You can have clients coming and go, right, I've got a wedding this weekend. I'm really into my stuff, but it's a wedding. It's a social occasion. I'm going to be drinking. Right, that look at it as a case of that's a one-off. How can you help them out with it? If they're doing it as a constant repetitive thing, then go for these three. Get them to make different plans, look at their own personal reflection, and look at motivational interview. Right, considerations for the morbidly obese. So when it comes to nutrition and training strategies, if you've got someone who is morbidly obese, you will be able to instill an aggressive fat loss approach without them even trying. If someone is morbidly obese, they are more than likely going to have low expenditure, and that is where you need to get them addressed first. So any kind of movement, that is steps, that is cardio, that is playing sport, that is getting them to do anything which is classed as exercise without them thinking that it is exercise. So overall, just push movement up first. Then what you've got to take into consideration is the psychology in which has kind of got them to that point. The activity level, which was just touched on, right? Why have they got a binge behavior in place? And what is their self-worth and their environment, which is probably going to be affecting their binge behavior? So kind of what gets to me sometimes with people who are overweight is when people turn around and go, right, they're fat and you're lazy. No, they're not. There's been something which has got them to this point. Something in their life which has made them reach out for food as a release or food as a comfort, whether it is previous, current, future, whatever. But it's really, really important for you as a coach to try and look at what is actually formulating this binge behavior. Is it how they feel about themselves? Can you look at, again, motivational interviewing, support, looking at trying to increase their confidence? Is it their environment? Is this kind of something at their workplace, at their home, at their friendship group? Because you need to try and help them identify where this behavior is coming from. Then again, looking at a support network, behavior change as normal. So again, exactly the same as imagine you've got a weekend warrior and you've got an everyday warrior when it comes to someone who's morbidly obese. So what behaviors can you make on a day-to-day basis, which is going to eliminate damage limitation? So can they swap sugary drinks for low sugar stuff? Can they simply look at increasing their steps by 200-300 every so often and throughout their day? You've got to get them to plan their day out. And basically these people will look and go, they've got no time. But because they're so used to not doing much, when they are, they feel like I'm doing loads of stuff. But then when they are more active and they're dropping blood out, they feel good for it. So the most important thing with someone from a nutrition and training strategy would be making sure that they are psychologically in a place to actually emit these behavior changes. Because if you get someone who's morbidly obese and you throw them into a strict diet, same meals constantly, and then you've got strict training program, which is not really that confident about, or for example, they've not got the confidence to go into the gym and perform it, they're not going to do it. The compliance is not there. You're not going to get someone from A to B. Like I have done some very, very massive fat loss transformations in my time over the years. And the best ones, I've had fingers, I've worked with people over the years where I potentially pushed them a little bit too far at the last minute and may have actually caused a bit of a rebound, because these people, if you want someone who's been overweight like this, you do not get rid of that feeling. That is still always going to be there. It's like, for example, the moment that you step onto stage of bodybuilding or you've kind of competed, you've always got that feeling in your head of going, I kind of want that. Or there's part of it what doesn't or done. And it's a case of when you've been big and you've had that level of comfort, and it's a psychological issue. It's so important for you to make sure that you do not push the client to the point of that binge. So it's a case of balance. Do not be putting extreme measures in place for these people, because you can make drastic changes with absolutely minute little changes, such as drinks, such as simply hitting a protein target per day, such as changing what alcohol they're having, get them to walk to work twice per week, and they'll drop 3-4 kilos just from doing those steps. So look at kind of smaller changes for this side of things, but again, address psychology. And it's exactly the same for under eating, which I'm not going to spend too much time on this one. So when it comes to someone who's under eating, so you've got to address, right, is there binge behavior to the point where they are making themselves throw up? Again, going on to this side, do you know the more I think about someone who's under eating, what you've got to understand, there is people who are under eating, and then there are people who are severely, severely ill. So, for example, if somebody is eating a lot to the point where they are morbidly obese, they're unhealthy, but they're nowhere near as healthy as someone who is anorexic. That is a serious, serious psychological issue. And if you come across a client who is nearly at that point, you need to make sure that they get professional help. Yes, you can support them, but you've got to understand, when someone takes their self to that level, you can do some serious digestion and intestinal damage, some serious psychological stuff, because it is self-harm. I'm also a big believer that someone who is forcing themselves with food is also self-harm, but you do actually get benefits from eating more energy. So that's kind of why it's seen as a little bit different. But yeah, you've got to kind of come in and go, right, you'll have, for example, this is often with maybe younger lads and younger guys that kind of just stop eating, really, really common with them. Right, so you've got to educate them. So, for example, if you've got a guy who wants to build muscle, but he really, really can't eat, you've got to look at education. You've got to over-explain and over-support. But again, I'm not going to cover this one too much. I want to put it on just for that point alone, that you've got to differentiate the difference between someone who's slightly underweight and someone who is ill. And if someone who is really ill, you need to look at your scope of practice, exactly the same as what I've spoke about from a physiological perspective and physiotherapy and injury prevention and stuff like that. If someone's at that point from a nutrition perspective, you need to look at further help, which is kind of not under your scope of practice. Right, female suboptimal body fat. So obviously, when someone gets to a point of female suboptimal body fat, it's like under 15%. So basically, as you can see, and you'll know this, that women need to hold more body fat than men, because they've got to support life, and they have actually got to have specific weight around their womb and around their abdomen, which will support a baby. When a woman gets to a point of suboptimal body composition, it is a little bit slightly more problematic than someone who is a male and kind of looking at getting really, really shredded as well. Because you can take a guy's body fat percentage down too much, and they'll have stress and stuff like that, but they're not going to have physiological implications like, again, the cessation of the menstrual cycle. So what you need to understand is, if you're going to coach someone, to a female, to lower body fat, you need to take your goddamn time. I see females trying to rush aggressive fat loss to this point of optimal body composition and absolutely messing themselves up. You can, and I frequently do have females who have got ripped abs, ripped back, and they're still having frequent periods. They're experienced dietary and training to reduce stress, but there is no point where their body is starting to shut down. That's basically what happens. Your body, if you push a female too far with aggressive fat loss, their body will literally get to the point where they're like, no, too much for me, right? What needs to give? Right, I'm going to stop the ability to support life. That's not good for a female. I have worked with females where it's taken maybe 4, 5, 6 months for them to actually get their natural period back after the damage that someone has done. So what I want to say to this is, if you have not got experience or the knowledge to take someone to a point of suboptimal body composition, then please do not do it. It's really not a smart move for you or them. But the main factors affecting this will be their overall stress. They need to be in a stress-free environment throughout the whole of the process. They need to be looking at their training volume. So again, are they pushing themselves too much on a parasympathetic, on a sympathetic nervous state? So they're in overdrive, fight or flight response. What is their expenditure like? Have they started doing cardio and steps way too early? Have they dropped their calories and macros alongside training volume and high stress? That's going to create a higher emotional response. That means that they're going to be trying to push this off their training intensity, which is going to be even more stress. But again, the most important thing for female suboptimal body composition is these two. If you want to take someone and take a female to very, very good condition, their starting point is the platform in which you have to break everything down. And then you go for a very, very, very slow approach on a week-to-week, day-to-day basis. If you want to take a female over a period to get real lean and maintain their health, I do not believe you should do anything less than 12 to 16 weeks. Whereas if it was a guy at the same body composition, I know I could do it in 4 to 6 weeks without the implications. So that's all I will say. When it comes to coaching females to getting them in shape, take your time, not only for the quality of the result, but also their health as well. Right, when it comes to guys, bam, blast them. No, I'm joking. It's exactly the same. So if you want to be like I said, when it comes to dropping body fat on a bloke, it's really, really easy. They can deal with quite high stress as long as they can maintain good nutrition compliance and high output. Their testosterone-filled bodies will carry them into a good place. But what you've got to understand is you don't just want to take someone to a place of suboptimal body composition for the sake of it. You want to take them to a place of suboptimal body composition with a really good look, where they are looking healthy, they're looking full, rather than they have been stripped of that much life that they're looking flat as a pancake. And again, if you take a client to that point where they're just losing body fat for the sake of it, they're not going to enjoy the process, and they are also going to have a really, really high drop-off effect. So kind of what affects that? Again, it's exactly the same. You've got stress, you've got training volume, expenditure, calories, macros, and it's exactly the same. All I'm going to say when it comes to a male is you can push higher fat loss assistance, and you can push higher fat loss assistance on females, but again, you will create a tiny bit of stress from that side of things if you do use it. But again, I don't recommend it. It's just that I know that a lot of people who are doing this kind of mentorship will be coming from general population, will be coming from bodybuilding and stuff like that. So I'm not going to be looking at avoiding taboo topics like I've said on the previous slides. But all I'm going to say is, yes, it will improve dietary induced stress. It will induce training induced stress. But again, the use of anything such as yihimbine and stuff like that, you've got to have medical history from a client. You've got to kind of know them, and also taper it up. But from when it comes to coaching male fat loss, yeah, it's used quite commonly. And what I'll say is, if have a conversation with a client, and this is absolutely no joke, I would say that if you turn around to a male client, and 30-40% of them will be trying to source it themselves. So it's kind of important that you do it. You do it with them or advise them against it based on if someone's making really, really good progress and they don't need it, don't go for it. But when it comes to male fat loss, you can go aggressive. But again, if you are going aggressive on a low carb approach, then that client will be coming out the other end really flat, really deflated, and feeling quite defeated in the whole process as well. So you want to be dieting someone down at the highest carbohydrate intake that you possibly can. You don't want to be causing too much GI distress from too much high protein just because of the thermic effect of food. But again, it's got to have a really big balance to it. If you push expenditure too fast, you're going to leave someone not be able to recover, feeling flat, looking deflated. So yeah, I wanted to, at 55 minutes, I wanted to hammer as many of them as I could. anything on that's like, look, I know on that, all them slides I've just been through, there's gonna be quite a lot of questions on them. Please fire it over. So if there's anything specific about a certain client that you're talking about, I can give a recommendation and can kind of support you in what your answer is. But I don't ever want to present based on exact extremes of individuals, because that is not how you should coach people. That is like someone coming to me, standing outside my door and going, yeah, can I have a diet plan? And I've not even looked at them yet. And I've gone, there you are. Or a training plan and gone, there you are. Don't work like that. But if you need any support or anything, please let me know. Right, final one. Final slide of the whole business one. Are you spending most of your capacity on your worst client? So you are only as good as your worst client. So if it's kind of one thing that I want you to remember moving forwards from this point, because you can go in a really wrong direction or a really unmotivated direction if you don't get this right. You've got to know who you are, know who you want to work with, know how you want to work with them, know why you want to work with them. If you are working with your ideal target client, then you are going to move forward in this industry. If you are working with a client which is not sticking to their diet, not sticking to their training, they are not checking and not providing the information, they're just paying you for the sake of it, and you're not getting that client a result, you are not going to progress fast in this industry. All I need you to think about is you're going to have clients who are going to waste your time. Seriously, I swear to God. You can have clients which are going to waste your time. You can have clients which aren't. And what you've got to do is you've got to choose your battles from this point. So important to understand that you are not there to try and work with everyone. You can be specific in who you want to work with. And over time, when you work with these different population groups, you'll really start to nail that down. So again, I have tried to throw everything at these slides and then some more. And then, like I said, any questions as normal, please fire it over. You're about to head up a lot more of the heavy education side with Matt, Luke, and Callum. And obviously, we are all going to have, whenever you have finished this presentation, we are obviously going to be having all the 6 presentations live and everyone on camera chatting to each other and having a big discussion overall. And I generally can't wait for it. So really looking forward to the presentations. I can't wait to see what everyone achieves by the end of the 6 months. And I can't wait to get to all, get to know you all personally anyway. But yeah, email, questions, anything you need. Thank you very much.